Brian, do you want to do that?
Yeah.
I'll just look at. Okay, I'm gonna start the go live. I just pressed it, so it's gonna be in a sec. All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Sunday morning live stream of a Keeping Karlsson episode with our special guest here, Dom Lecision. This isn't the official start of the show, so we don't have to bring our full energy yet. But we can say hello to anyone watching on YouTube.
I feel like I can get my full pronunciation in there because I've been on here for like 4 or 5 years now, and that was weak.
That was weak, Lecision?
Yeah, that was tough. That was tough.
I thought I nailed it.
No, you had the very common pronunciation of when you look at it, you're like, oh, that looks like Curtis Lecision, and it's not.
It's going to be something like where you're going to tell me, and I'm going to be like, that's what I said, I think, or maybe not. So can you just tell me one time, please?
Let's get Brian on the chat, see how he pronounces it.
Brian, you're muted, I think.
I've been talking like a bunch, and I'm like, why isn't no one Lecision? How'd I do?
I can't tell if that's better or worse. It's Lecision.
Lecision.
You've never told us this.
I think you changed it recently.
Yeah.
No, I
this
didn't.
You're
That's always been the pronunciation.
Lecision.
It's like when they changed Czechoslovakia or whatever to be, or Czech Republic to be Czechia,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden everyone was saying that I need to now know how to pronounce that off the bat without having heard it. Lecision.
Lecision.
Lecision. There you go.
Lecision.
All right, I got it. Lecision. It's easy.
We'll see how you do next year.
You want to try my name? No, I'm just kidding. Okay. One thing I noticed, by the way, this is gonna be so annoying. Like, I think, Dom, sometimes your like microphone is like bouncing against your face or something. Like it's making a little like, I don't know, bloop bloop. Sometimes.
Mine?
Yeah. Like it's almost like it's like rubbing against something.
I don't know. I'm using a computer mic, so that might be why.
Oh, we should send Dom a mic.
Okay, next time.
After all these years.
I have a mic. I just woke up 10 minutes ago and took the dogs out and said, "Will I set up my mic for this?"
I mean, I'm down to wait.
And I said no. Do you want me to go get it?
How long do you need?
Yeah.
I don't know, probably like 5 seconds. Hold on. You also
Okay.
make sure my dog doesn't go in the bathroom and rip up my bath mat again.
No.
Well, thanks everyone joining live. In the meantime,
we live?
Yeah, we're live this whole time.
Oh, Lecision.
Lecision. It's easy. But no, for real, it wasn't that last year. This is Mandela effect. I swear. I need to go back. We have these all recorded, right?
No, I know, because I was actually patting myself on the back earlier today.
Oh, cute.
For all the great Dom title. Like I was thinking, what am I going to title this episode? Like we've had now I have to say it differently, but Lecision Tova when we recorded right around Rosh Hashanah.
Yes, I recall.
We had draft day decisions with Dom Lecision, which I think is what I'm going to go with again this year. We had courteous Lecision, which I thought was brilliant.
Well, you've used them all. You have to come up with something new. You can't just go with it.
Well, I think draft day decisions is like a good one to just like roll with. Like we don't rename Goalie's board every year.
I guess, yeah, this is a classic.
How am I sounding now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's better, eh?
So much better.
Did we see the puppy?
Yeah. What's her name or his name?
Her name is Ocean.
Oh.
Ocean. Maybe my dog.
Wow. Look at that dog. Look at that pup.
Yeah,
she's gonna be a big one, right?
Like medium size. She'll probably be like 50 pounds or so.
Oh, seems heavy. It's
all
like
right.
20 pounds more than my 4-year-old.
I'm gonna start recording this now. So just one quick sec.
Oh, Ben knows in our chat that you are wearing a 47 cap.
There you go.
People know this.
Yeah, it's the brand.
Ben's cooler and younger than me, like you.
Get your dad caps going. You say just like me? How
Yeah.
old do you think I am?
You're younger than me, for sure. How old do you think I am?
Oh, I thought we were all just the same age, just 3 dudes who are almost 30.
Age ain't nothing but a number.
Us. I'm more like the Zdeno Chara of the podcast.
Yeah.
except not strong or big.
I'm like the Wade Redden.
All right. And what does that make? Then Dom's the Karlsson.
Well,
Nice.
yeah.
Nice.
There it is.
Love that.
All right, let's do this. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I start the show in a wonky way. Yeah, yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who wonder how we'd rank in Dom's podcast model. I'm your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and with me, as usual, first of all, is the fantasy hockey robot, Brian Com. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Elon. How's it go? Oh, that's not how I start. Hi, Elon. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with not just you, but our very special guest today. It's an annual tradition. Introduce him. Yeah.
I'm so stoked because once a year we bring this guy in. He makes a model, he makes a spreadsheet, he gives us projections, and then we bring him on the show and we ask him why he chose the numbers that he did. It's the great Dom Luszczyszyn. Dom, welcome to Keeping Karlsson.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. It's nice hearing my name pronounced so correctly.
Yeah, you know, it's just because I know it. Like I meet people and I learn their names and I know it forever. And that's just how it goes. We definitely didn't have a pre-show discussion about this. But yes, we're so excited to have you here because once again, your fantasy hockey cheat sheet has dropped on The Athletic. And this year I see it's not only you who made it, you brought in Shayna Goldman, who's a friend of the show and someone we like. And so like, there's no doubt that this is the tool that everyone needs to use to be successful in fantasy. So I'd love to just get started with, giving the floor to you to just really quickly, like tell people, like I have a bunch of specific questions. You want to just maybe tell people in general, like what is this like spreadsheet and why they should be downloading it?
Yeah, so the basic idea is that every hockey pool is different in some way. You all have some weird rules. There's no standard formula like there is in football. So rather than go off rankings where the person ranking is going off some league setting that might not apply to you, I made a spreadsheet where it would customize a ranking based on what your actual scoring system is, how many players there are in your league. And it is, I think, a very useful tool in that way because most people will just go by the standard rankings and that might not be how your league is run. And it gives you a little extra boost to draft players based on how they actually score in your league.
Yeah, like Brian and I do a whole show every preseason where we go through the Yahoo default rankings and sort of like point out the players that we think are too high or too low, because that's such an advantage if you're drafting with people who go by those rankings. But yeah, the smart drafters are using a sheet like yours. And the way I see it, your tool here is like two parts, right? There's the projections, which will be like the meat of this show, where it's fun to look into the specific numbers you gave to players. But also, yeah, there's this like whole fancy spreadsheet that converts the projections into a ranking for like your specific league. And so I wanted to start with that second part, ask a few questions about like sort of the mechanics of how this all works. Like I know that basically the idea here is that for example, for different positions, we don't want to just say like, oh, this forward's going to get 50 more points than this defenseman. So obviously you want to get the forward. You use value over replacement to calculate like that maybe a defenseman who gets fewer points is still worth more because defensemen are like more rare than a forward, for example. Can you just explain like sort of how you go about this like VORP or value over replacement calculation? Because we've gotten a lot of questions of people who have downloaded your sheet, because I know you've given some like customization of how people can choose to calculate VORP for their league.
Yeah, so I discovered this Googling fantasy football strategies several years ago and figured it'd be a way. That's how this whole custom rankings thing started, by turning VORP into something that could make dynamic rankings based on your actual scoring system. And the basic idea is what you explained. A forward may outscore defensemen, but because good defensemen are so rare, it might be better to actually choose the defenseman. So for example, my default settings, Nikita Kucherov is projected for like 493 points. Makar is projected for 434, 60-point difference. Who would you rather have? It's probably a toss-up because their VORP is equal, where even though Kucherov should outscore Makar, because of the scarcity of defensemen, Makar is still an equal pick, and sort of puts all the positions in context. And the way that I generally do it is based off the draft. So how managers usually draft off the top 100. So this year, that was 21 centers, 21 left wingers, 18 right wingers, 22 defensemen, 18 goalies. And essentially every center is projected over that 21st center. That's the replacement center, and VORP is how many points the center gets over that 21st player. There are some people who think it's better to just go by position, where if you have 2 centers in your starting lineup and there are 12 teams, then you actually compare it to the 24th center. But the issue that you get with that is that usually there are 4 defensemen, and now you're comparing it to the 48th defenseman, where most of the managers won't be drafting defensemen that high and that much really early. So you're putting yourself at a bit of a disadvantage where you can get those defensemen later and you're sort of reaching when you don't need to. That's why it's sort of better to go by draft base. But maybe if you want to see that extra value for defensemen, you can sort of blend them together, and there's an option for that as well.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people have been asking, like, oh, should I use, like, that's that feature that you have. Like, people can put in the number of players that are going to be drafted at each position, and they can also put how many players are in the starting lineup for each position, and then you can choose, like, which version you want to use, like position draft or, like you said, blend. And a lot of people have been asking us, like, oh, which one should I use? I feel like you should, like, generate a rankings with one setting and then kind of get a sense of, like, your league, right? Like, do defensemen generally get drafted as high as what Dom's projections are ranking? Then I feel like that's kind of the way I would do it. Anyways.
Yeah, that's how I would do it. I think going by position is a bit too aggressive for defensemen. I just prefer to draft. I think the best way to draft is no one knows you're using a sheet like this, where you sort of try to pick players where they're supposed to go and sort of plan for when to pick those guys who come up a lot higher on the spreadsheet that aren't being drafted as high or whatever. So I remember last year, Josh Norris, everyone's like, why am I drafting Josh Norris? You could tell who used my spreadsheet.
I knew when I was drafting against someone who was using your sheet, because Josh Norris, and I think it was Nick Suzuki, and there were a couple guys who were like way up higher on your sheet than they were on any default draft rankings. And I knew it was a tell.
And Josh Norris popped off. And I was vindicated.
Yeah, that was a great call.
But yeah, so there'll always be players like that. And so you sort of have to think, when do I draft my Josh Norris? And you should look at his ADP, and maybe at a round or two before that, you pull the trigger and get your guy, I guess. And I don't know who that is this year. I'm not sure at all, but I'm sure I'll find out when everyone starts tweeting at me. Might be Matty Beniers.
At least your Josh Norris is better than like the Yahoo guys of years past. Like Martin Marinson had a heck of an ADP year a few years back, and I think Mathieu Biron once upon a time. This is years ago now though, but Josh Norris has a better chance of hitting. I'm going to now I'm looking through your whole sheet to figure out who this year's Josh Norris is.
I was trying to do that too.
Well, the Beniers is an interesting one, because another feature of your sheet this year is you've added this ability for people to add like a plus or a minus beside each player, like kind of like this like boost if they want to change the projection a little bit without having to go into like your data and actually change the numbers. You could just sort of add like 10%, remove 10%, and you have provided your opinions of who should be getting these pluses and minuses. And yeah, Beniers, your model I see had him projected originally for 74 points, and you brought him all the way down to 67. So you even gave him a minus, but that still has him like pretty high, projecting a rookie for 67 points. So maybe like my next question can be like switching over now to the projections part of how you came up with these numbers. Well, okay, I guess there's like the general question of how does it work in general. Then I'm curious about how does it work like for rookies specifically. But I know that maybe we could wait for rookies for a bit. But I know for general players, I know that from past shows we've done, you talk about how like you take like the last 3 years or so of data, and then you're like weighting it. Maybe the most recent seasons are worth more. But then there's also a bunch of other things you put into, like you've told us about like aging curves and like, I don't know, like time on ice estimations. Maybe can you tell us like a bit of what is the secret sauce that ends up with a projection before you add your plus or minus?
I mean, you got a very good memory there. That is basically the gist of it. It's the last 3 years. Most recent season is weighted heavier. It's adjusted for age, and then everything is projected on a per minute basis. So the big thing is trying to project ice time. So normally I talk to every beat writer and I say, what's the depth chart looking like? Who's on the top power play? All this stuff. And this year I made Shayna do that because she's working full time now, and I can get her to do those things. Shayna's actually worked on this every year. Every year I message her and say, can I give you money to get ADP for everyone? Because I don't want to do it. And that has been our little system. And now that she's here full time, I've been able to just say, Shayna, go get the ADP. And she actually helped the pluses and minuses. We talked on the phone, or like, well, first we went through it ourselves, and then anytime there's a discrepancy, we talk on the phone, like, why'd you give this guy a plus? Why'd you give this guy a minus? And we made a conglomerated list because while the projections are pretty good, I come on the show every year to talk about why they're not better and perfect. And we talk about the players we disagree with. And you guys are like, why do you have this guy high? And I'm like, I don't know. I agree. And
yeah, so this year will be more interesting because we could just ask you about who you gave pluses and minuses to and why you did that.
yeah, because one of the things is I don't control for players changing teams and the context changing around them. So I remember when Phil Kessel went from Pittsburgh to Arizona, his projection was super high, but the model doesn't know that. He's went from playing with Evgeny Malkin to Nick Schmaltz or Clayton Keller. And so in that year, I would have given some minuses because the projection was probably a bit too aggressive. This year, for example, the first minuses go to Patrick Kane because everyone in Chicago left, and it was probably aggressive to project 90 something points for someone who doesn't really have anyone to play with. It depends on if he gets traded and how soon that happens. But for now, it's probably better to be safe with a more modest projection.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about Patrick Kane. Your model had him originally as a 94-point guy after he's paced for like 96 plus for the past 4 seasons. So your model already was bringing him down a little bit. I assume that's because of age, like the age curve. But then you bumped him down all the way to 85 points, like closer to a point per game. Is this more to do? It sounds like you're saying this has to do with just the fact that all the players left Chicago, not necessarily that you think like Patrick Kane is like a lot worse of a player next year.
Yeah, that is entirely based off of context. And Shayna wrote an article going through some of the pluses and minuses and why we decided them. But sometimes it was as simple as, oh yeah, I like that guy, and we wanted him a little higher. Or sometimes he had a season last year where he broke out, and the model is a little slow to catch up. So we wanted to maybe give that boost because we believe in what that player did last year.
Yeah. And then someone like Beniers, I'm curious to know, because your model originally projected him, like I said, for 74. How do you project a rookie? Like, how do you pass in whatever you pass in and then get 74 points for Matty Beniers, who only has that, 10 games of NHL experience?
I used those 10 games of NHL experience, and in that time, he was amazing. And so I think he is definitely an interesting player for drafting purposes this year. I think he should be available extremely late, but I think the top center job in Seattle is like open for the taking. And last year in 10 games, he had 9 points, averaging, I think, 17 minutes. And I don't know if a lot of that was on the power play either. So I think I adjusted that accordingly, and it came out extremely high, and we had to reel it back a bit for the sake of these projections.
Yeah, he had 4 power play points in those 10 games. He was like seeing top unit time, so like a 65% share. But like that bodes really well for what to expect this year. If he was able to see the majority power play time in 10 rookie games, then that's kind of Seattle tipping their hand that he's going to get more. And like it's a huge number. Like I love, like I'm still trying to figure out like how exactly, like how, like you took those 10 games, you saw how great he was. What exactly, like, is there any more detail about how the calculation ended up being so high for him, especially as a rookie? Because I know in the past, I think we were going to get to this later, but I might as well ask now, like your model without having that historical data has been really low on rookies. Am I remembering right? And so this is like a totally new look.
It is really low on rookies when I need to use data outside the NHL. So I don't know who that applies for this year, but they're normal low self. This year, Beniers and Power both had some NHL time, and so they're pretty high because what they showed in that NHL time already was so strong. Basically, there's just this heavy dose of regression based on sample size. So someone like Kane, if they score 96 points 3 years in a row, played all their games, they are going to be projected for around 94 because they've been consistent. Whereas if someone scores at a 96 point pace over 10 games, they might be regressed to like 50 or 60. Like there's signal in 10 games where sometimes it's a hot streak, but sometimes this player has already got it, because even getting a 10 game sample where you're above point per game, like that doesn't happen for just anyone. I remember when Austin Matthews was a rookie, I projected what he would do after one game because he scored 4 goals. I'm like, what does a 4-goal game do for projection? And I think immediately after that, I was like, yeah, this is a 40-goal scorer just based off of one game. And I think if you just regress it properly based on sample size, you can get a lot of information out of a small amount of data. With Beniers, the issue is that he is extremely young. So the age curve bumps up that projection and limits the effect that regression has. And it basically says he scored 9 points in 10 games. He can probably score at a 0.9 point per game pace. And it's probably a little too aggressive for me, but he was pretty impressive in that time. And I think bumping him down to the 60-point range makes sense. I think he's going to get an ample opportunity in Seattle to be the guy. And we saw Matt Boldy, I think, scored a similar pace last year. It's not completely out of the question. He has high pedigree. I like him a lot. But yeah, he did need to be bumped down a bit.
Yeah, I guess also you've talked, like you said, you talked to the beat writers. So I'd imagine that your Seattle contact was telling you that you're expecting like a lot of ice time and a lot of power play time for Beniers, which helps since he's, I think, the number one center going into next season, right?
Yeah, he is. And Seattle definitely splits their time a bit, but it should be Beniers for next year being the guy.
So then one more like mechanics question, I guess, before we get into more specific players. So I guess we've already kind of dug into Beniers at least. Like the goalies, yeah. What previous data are you looking for when you're because here you're projecting like a save percentage, number of saves, and number of games played. I'd imagine like for save percentage, you could go by their previous individual performance. So I'd imagine the team. Like I'm just curious to know how much their team matters for these projections, because like for goalies, like it matters so much what the defense is like. And you know, people like Darcy Kemper, like Jack Campbell, who have switched teams. I'm curious to know how your model accounted for that, if it did at all, because yeah, you had to come up with a number of games and a number of saves.
So for the majority of goalies, I just go by save percentage in the same manner. I project based on the last 3 years, weight on recency. Actually, I think for goalies it's 5 years because more data is better for goalies. For the goalies that switch teams, I looked at their save percentage above expected on one team, and then looked at what their expected save percentage for that team was last year, and I sort of blended the two together. So I think last year Toronto's expected save percentage was higher than Edmonton's, so I dropped Campbell's save percentage down a bit to reflect his new environment. Same with Matt Murray, who's going from Ottawa to Toronto, where the defense is fairly stronger.
I got to ask you about the Matt Murray projection, because the thing that jumps out to me, because I was like thinking, I don't know, Dom's kind of a Leafs fan, and I see you've got 50 games projection for Matt Murray, which is like, does your model take into account the fact that he's always injured for a large chunk of the season?
Games played projections are generally based on vibes only for goalies.
Okay.
I go by whether he's a starter and whether he is going to be like someone who has a huge workload like UC Saros, or whether it'll be like a player who maybe just gets like a 1A role. And I think because of Murray's injury risk and because Samsonov is there, I put him down for 50, but I assume the Leafs will try to play him a bit more. It'll just have to like manage the risk a bit. 50 is probably a bit generous, but I think Murray is worth a pretty high pick because he's going to be playing for one of the best teams in the league. And I think he has a very strong supporting cast in front of him. And if your league values wins, I think the Leafs are going to have a lot of those.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. You're kind of, sounds like you're saying, like, assuming he's healthy, you expect Murray to play 50 games, but then it's kind of up to the person drafting to decide how much, risk they want to take in terms of like, this guy sometimes gets injured. By the way, is that your dog playing with a chew toy in the back? Yes. Sounds like she's having a great time. Hi, Ocean.
Yeah, she's she walked right by my legs. I saw the little chew toy in her mouth, and she's squeaking her life away over there.
So since we're on the goalies, I'm curious to ask, like, who would you rather draft? Because another interesting goalie that's really high up in your list, including like along with Matt Murray, is Alex Georgiev, who has never really done anything in the NHL. Last year he had a 898 save percentage, the year before 905, and the year before 910. But your model spat out a 915 save percentage and 52 games, and like so that works out to a lot of wins because he's obviously on Colorado now. So I'd be curious to know, first of all, like how you came up with that like save percentage for Georgiev, and then also who would you rather draft between Georgiev and Matt Murray for a draft next year?
So one of the regressions I do is based on their role. So for players, if like a player who gets 10 minutes per night gets regressed differently than someone who gets 20 minutes per night. Like you get regressed to your peers. And so rather than regress all the way to the mean, someone who scores 100 points is going to be regressed towards players who play a lot in our first liners and regress to that mean. So I've like different means based on role. And the same thing goes for goalies, where if you're a starter, you're going to be regressed to other starters. And if you're a backup, you're going to be regressed to other backups. It's based on, I guess, games played. And with Murray and Georgiev, because they are the starters now, they got bumped up because they're being regressed to other starters. Maybe that was not the safest way to do things, but if they were given that role and Colorado right off the bat said Georgiev's our starter, then they're going to be treated that way. And the more games they play in that role, the more that'll adjust. But yeah, for both Colorado and Toronto, we've seen that they don't need strong goaltending to win. Toronto had, I think, the fourth worst save percentage in the league last year, something like that. Colorado won the cup with Kemper playing with one eye. So I think both will be fine to get wins. Save percentage might be a bit of a different story, but we'll see. I think I would prefer Georgiev, but I think it's pretty close. You're basically, when you're drafting those guys, you're drafting for the team. And I think Colorado is probably a little safer than Toronto, though they lost a lot of talent. I think that's going a little underrated this year.
Right. Okay. And I guess it's so tricky because they're both goalies like Murray's shown us like in short spurts the ability to be really good, but then also a lot of struggles. And Georgiev, I don't know. I guess it'll be interesting to see because he's on a different team, and like New York is so bad at protecting their goalies, so it might just be like a nice new mindset shift for him to play on a stronger team. Even if, like you say, they've lost some players, they still obviously had quite a few. They were able to afford to lose at least a couple.
Yeah, with Georgiev, one of the other things. Sorry to cut you off, but what I've heard is that this is from Shayna, who is a Rangers fan, so she's got the inside info. But Georgiev is better when he's in a rhythm and can play more games, and so being behind Shesterkin, I think, didn't help his numbers. But once Shesterkin had, I think, a brief moment of injury and Georgiev started a few games in a row, he was a bit better, and he's been better in the past based on that. But we'll see if that is a thing. Goalies are voodoo, obviously.
That's what we've noticed too about, by the way, I'm furiously trying to look up in the pronunciation guide. We've been calling Georgiev all these years after being corrected. And in the official NHL guide, it's spelled Gee to pronounce the Georgi, like the first part of his name. I'm going to join you because I think I'm going to switch over to Georgiev. You sound like you know and you talk to Shayna, who watches a lot of Rangers hockey. But we've noticed too that Georgiev is like, when he's subbed in for a hurt goalie, when he's gotten a few games in a row, it gets really exciting. And then it's really boom or bust when he is just spot starting. And we heard also in our beat writers interview for the Rangers that like he was unhappy with the situation, which is kind of like, it was kind of funny. It's like he thought he deserved to play more games. Like, I'm sorry, but you're behind Igor Shesterkin, so there's not really that opportunity. But here in Colorado, like, he has a good case to make. And I find it interesting that you have Georgiev and Murray like back to back pretty much on your draft list, just because, Matt Murray has been this guy who's like either been really awesome or really terrible, and there hasn't been a lot of in between. And then Georgiev has been this guy who's just, he's never been like I'm using like Delta Fenwick save percentages, and he's never been actually good over the course of a full season, but he has been about average. And you have him at 915, I think, which is, if you sort of shave off like Kemper's 921 from last year in Colorado, see that the defense should be just as good, shave off a bit, you land at 915. And I think it makes a lot of sense. So it's going to be, I think that's going to be a tell, honestly. Like, that could be your Josh Norris, like the Georgiev and Murray, to see how early they go. Because I think they'll be under the radar in most leagues. But I think it'll be pretty clear who's got them really high based on your sheet from those ADPs.
Yeah, I see their draft. It's the same with when Kemper went to Colorado. I remember his ADP was really low. I'm like, this is the Colorado goalie, right? Like, he's gonna play. And it was the same thing with him. He had injury troubles or questions about whether he could start all these games. And I don't know why he wasn't being drafted as highly. He was the starter for the Avalanche. And I think people like to look at drafting goalies as if they're drafting the goalie, but a lot of times you're drafting the team.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess like last year, I totally agreed with you. Like Kemper's going to be the starter. Like this year, I guess like when I first saw that Georgiev came over to Colorado, I'm switching to Georgiev also.
You guys should
you know,
not trust me on that, by the way. I don't know.
You're the
Well,
you're the expert on the show today, so we'll at least go with that.
in one guide, it starts with GEE. In another guide, it starts with GHEE. And I'm not sure how to pronounce either of those.
Okay, we'll do our best. But yeah, like this year, like, you know, it doesn't seem as obvious, or at least it didn't seem as obvious. I thought, oh, it could be Francouz and Georgiev like splitting time. But then like we just had this interview with your colleague Peter Bao earlier this week, and he was saying, yeah, no, it's Georgiev is the one who's going to be the starter to start the year, and so he'd have to like lose the job. But okay, let's switch to some skaters now. Looking at all your pluses and minuses, and again, the way you had it is, and it's the cool thing about the spreadsheet is everything's configurable, right? So you can just go in, but right, the way you have it by default is like 3 pluses is like a 20% dip or increase, and then 2 pluses or minuses is 10%, and then 1 is 5%. And your only triple plus player, the person you're bumping up 20% from your model, is Jack Hughes. So without the triple plus, Hughes would only come out to 27 goals and 66 points by your model, but you bumped him all the way up to 32 goals and 79 points, so almost a point per game. I'm going to guess that his 49 games last season where he put up 56 points were enough to convince you that like the previous years can just be wiped away. Because before that, the year before, he was just around a 45-point guy. So am I correct in just assuming that you're just like, forget about everything you've seen from Jack Hughes before these last 49 games?
Yeah, that is basically it. I remember tweeting his first game 2 years ago. He looked insane. He was so good. He was dominating all over the ice. He couldn't finish. He was making plays. His teammates couldn't finish. And I tweeted, once Jack Hughes learns how to finish, it's over for everyone. And last year we saw exactly that. And Devils fans were excited. They retweeted that tweet so much. And it was one of my best prophecies ever. And it was one of the easiest ones to make because he is already one of the most skilled players in the league. And if you looked at his micro stats, if you follow Corey Schneider, he tracks every game. Before last year's explosion, Hughes was one of the best players in the league at moving the puck up ice, making plays. He had a similar profile to guys like Kane and Point and Marner, and he was really good at the puck. It just, he didn't have the right amount of puck luck. He didn't have the teammates. And last year that changed a bit. And I think when you have a guy with a high pedigree, with a high skill set, it is better to lean towards the breakout than lean towards the average of his last 3 seasons. And the model, I mean, for better or worse, goes in between and says, I know he paced at 95 points or whatever over 49 games, but that's not enough to go off of based on his prior 2 seasons. But me and Shayna love Hughes. We figure he should be around point per game player. And honestly, I think even with the 3 triple pluses, it's probably not high enough. But at the same time, if I look at my league settings, he's ranked 76th and his ADP is around 96, which is wild to me.
Yeah, that would be amazing to get Hughes just like barely inside the top 100. I don't think he's been calling quite that far in our Keeping Karlsson league mocks. But like it's like the recent record. I mean, towards his final games of last year, Hughes had 14 multi-point outings in the last 36 games, which means like he's winning you weeks with those multi-point performances. And what was interesting to me too is like, you know, the Devils have added to their lineup, and I'm like, okay, well, does that change any of the dynamics? But Hughes was still spending like his final 20 games of last year with Sharangovich and Mercer. And you have Jesper Bratt taking a step up and Andre Palat arriving. But I think maybe they're just going to hang out with Nico Hischier elsewhere in the top 6, which I think I'm hopeful that Hughes's line mates stay consistent, although you're not that worried. And I don't think I am too. I feel like he can make magic happen with anyone. I'm just like, you know, you said once he figures out how to finish, he's going to be amazing. Like what, I know your model's high, and I mean, you sound higher on him than even your model is. So like, what is that qualitative piece? Like, what have you seen that you like so much about Jack Hughes that like we could look for too?
He just has that like innate game breaking ability where he's just like so deceptive and creative with the puck. He has amazing vision, and just the plays he makes, he like immediately just reminds me of Patrick Kane in his prime. Just the way he handles the puck, he is so shifty, and obviously he's not a very big guy, but he handles it pretty well. There is like obviously the injury risk with him because he is smaller, but I think this will be a big year for him, just like last year was, and he will establish himself as a like franchise type player. I think last year was like the flash of it, and this year I think we're going to see it for real. The other thing that I think people need to know about Hughes is that the Devils power play sucked last year, and I'm pretty sure they fired their coach who handles that. And so it should be much improved this year.
Yeah, by the way, I should mention when you brought up the injury risk, all the numbers that I'm going to throw at you today when I'm talking about like what you projected, I just used that option on your spreadsheet of saying to ignore your games played projection and assume everyone's going to play 82, just so we could be comparing apples to apples. And like we said with Murray, people could make their own decisions of if they want to account for potential injury risks. But yeah, honestly, like even with your plus, like you said, and you've got Hughes at 79 points, I'd probably even bump him a little higher. Like I think I'd probably expect him to be more like a 85-ish. Look, I think he's similar to like a Patrick Kane at this point. All right, so Brian wanted to bring up the next player.
Well, here's someone else you've bumped higher and like is showing up like a lot earlier in drafts than usual. I'm talking about Vladimir Tarasenko, who like I have whiplash from going by last year. Like, so last year in the Cupful, which is the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patrons Fantasy League, kkupfl.com for more info. We still have space on the wait list. We're opening new divs. If you want to
buzz marketing to Dom or to the listener?
Oh yeah, Dom. This is actually direct marketing straight to Dom. It's the only reason we brought him on was to try and bring him into the Cupful. Open invitation. But Tarasenko last year in the Cupful, he was going 150th overall on average, like lumped in with guys like Ryan Strome, Rickard Rakell, Victor Arvidsson, Brock Nelson. This year, he's going top 50 in our mocks, and I'm regularly seeing him, end of third round, early fourth round, and I have to decide. It's like this guy clearly looks like the best guy on the draft board, according to whoever Fantrax uses for their projections and according to last year's performance, and also, Dom, according to your sheet, because you've got him boosted also, but like I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around it because since breaking out in 2014-15, Tarasenko had 78, 76, 75, 68, and 73 point paces, and then he had this like crazy 90 point pace at age 30 in like a season that of all seasons Tarasenko's ever had. This is the one we were expecting to not go well. And it was crazy. And he even had like his lowest average time on ice of his established career. But I think his numbers were like bolstered. He had a career high shooting percentage at 5-on-5, 17% versus 12%. His on ice shooting percentage also was higher than it's ever been before at 5-on-5. And I felt comfortable passing on him in like at those times around 50 in our mock drafts. And now I'm like, you're making me rethink things because you have that plus sign next to his name. I mean, we're kind of splitting hairs because you do have him closer to those mid 70 point paces than last year's 90 point pace, but there's still something that you seem to like about him more this year than your model will give him credit for. So what is that?
He's healthy. That's basically the gist of it. I think the years where he was really bad, he was just dealing with issues. But last year, I think he proved he was back to being that guy who can score at a point per game pace. And I think the original projection had him like low 70s or maybe even high 60s. And me and Shayna said, let's bump him higher because last year seemed like the real Tarasenko again. And he has a very strong supporting cast, and the way the Blues play, I feel like he can score a lot. I would be weary of drafting him high because he does have an injury history, but at the same time, I think this is a contract year for him, so wouldn't be shocked to see a big season.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, also, like when Brian, I know that you always got used to him being a mid-70s point guy for all those years, and now it's weird for you to like start thinking of him as like point per game.
It's but like my comfort. It's like if I can set my watch to anything in this world, it's Vladimir Tarasenko being mid-70s. If that changes, my whole world is upside down. That's why I'm fighting this so much.
But I guess all I was going to say is that like the NHL is scoring more goals now than like back when he was doing. So maybe he's the same player, but just like you just have to boost everyone by a little. It's inflation, unfortunately, happening all over the world, even in hockey. All right, next up, I want to go to Dom. I got a trivia question for you about your own projections. There's only one team that has multiple plus guys. So guys, if you added 2 pluses to, and actually the one team that has multiple of these guys has 3 of them. And then every other team either has 0 or 1. Do you want to try to guess which team you have 3 guys that you put a plus beside?
Rangers?
No, not the Rangers.
Interesting.
All right, well, I'll give you a clue. Columbus, you nailed it.
There it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
You've got 3 Blue Jackets that you're expecting to beat your model. So those are Zach Werenski, Patrick Laine, and Boone Jenner. Would you say, before we get into those specific players, would you say, are you just like generally higher on Columbus than most, or is it just these particular players?
No, I think my model just doesn't like Columbus, but that is basically the Johnny Gaudreau effect, where Boone Jenner, it looks like he'll be the guy between Laine and Gaudreau. Laine is going to be definitely playing with Gaudreau. That's probably why they signed him. And Werenski is going to be on that top power play. And I think that power play is going to get a lot better. That top line should score a lot. And you'll see that I knocked Gaudreau down, but I bumped everyone else up just because I think he has the ability to impact shooting percentage and make those players a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, like Gaudreau, like you bump him down and he's still like well above 100 points. So I think it's reasonable. And yeah, someone like a Werenski, I was curious to know because your model has him like super high. Like before your pluses, your model already had him at 57 points, which is what he did last season. But now you're bringing him up to like a 62 points. So is the idea here also just like you say, like I guess he's like the sure shot top power play, like more minutes than ever. Like, yeah, I guess like Columbus doesn't have like the deepest decor. So that's a good reason to be really excited about Werenski with Gaudreau coming in.
Yeah, and I see he's being drafted around 98. That's I feel like a nice target, especially if you already have a couple defensemen. If Zach Werenski is like your 3rd defenseman, that's pretty great.
Where are your ADPs coming from?
Yahoo.
Okay.
We got to fill out the ESPN ones. We got to get an update going.
Yeah. I mean, I like, again, I'm asking because I love that value. Like you mentioned, Jack Hughes is that, like, that's great. And I was looking him up in our Cupful ADPs and he's going like 30th on average in the Cupful. We've got Werenski going just ahead of 60th. So like he is valued in places, but I guess, you know, it's a bit, obviously the Yahoo default draft list decides a lot, but I love what you're doing and saying about Werenski. Like he's like underappreciated, I think, for what he did last year. And a lot of people would say, oh, well, he's been the same player for, you know, most of the last 5 years. And then all of a sudden he has a big season. Aren't we supposed to not believe in that? It's like, no, we are, because like the whole situation changed. Seth Jones was gone. And he started shooting so much more. Like he got the best shot rates of his career. He ranked 4th in the league amongst defensemen in shots per game. Huge ice time helped him get that. And even on the power play, he was averaging like nearly 1 expected goal per hour, which is that's high for a defenseman. And I don't see them changing that. And then I'm wondering, like just to keep going through Columbus, of course, tack on to anything I said about Werenski if the Love Fest needs to continue a little longer. But then we're looking at Patrick Laine, who also got a boost from you, who of course like struggled that first year in Columbus. That was the year with all the turmoil in Winnipeg and, you know, couldn't really adjust to Columbus right away. And then Boone Jenner, who we're sort of waiting to see where he slots into the lineup. So you've given them both a bit of a boost. So wondering if you could offer, like, I guess you're assuming that Laine is going to replace Voracek. I guess you're assuming that Laine is going to play with Gaudreau and not Voracek. And are you also assuming Jenner gets in on that action too? Like all these 3 guys are aligned?
Yeah, I would say so. That seems to be how they're configuring things. Once we see what's happening with training camp, we might go back and adjust some of the pluses and minuses. That's the beauty of having that feature, is we can alter it and have updates. Whereas in the past, we wouldn't be able to have those because it was basically just a set projection where we're just changing ice time around. But now we can make qualitative adjustments based on how players are situated during training camp. And for now, it seems like it'll be Jenner and Line, but who knows? Maybe it's Cole Sillinger, maybe it's Kent Johnson. I don't know.
Yeah, Boone Jenner obviously has a huge like boomer bust depending on where he slots in that lineup and if he holds that top power play spot. I guess article request when you go in and make those changes, I would definitely love if you dropped an article like letting us know who you decided to change their pluses and minuses and why. That would obviously be really useful.
That'll probably be a patch notes in the main article.
Hey, all right, whatever. We'll find it and we'll share it with our patrons at least. So okay, let's go to two other D that you boosted aside from Werenski, and those are Brent Burns and Miro Heiskanen. So Burns needed the boost just to maintain his pace from last year. Like he had the 54-point pace last year with the Sharks, and then I guess your model was going to bring him down probably because of the age regression, I'd assume. So you now boosted him back up to similar 55 with the Canes. I think a lot of people were kind of even thinking they wanted to go higher. You know, like, oh, well, if Burns got 54 last year with the Sharks, shouldn't he even do even better with the Canes? Like, especially since Tony DeAngelo is coming off a 65-point pace season with that team. So do you see Burns as like a sure shot top power play guy like all season long? Or do you think that like you had to, you know, keep him at where he was last year since like it's not a guarantee?
Yeah, honestly, now that you mentioned it, maybe should have given him a third plus. Because I do think like the reason we gave him pluses was because he's going to that Carolina power play, which is always lethal. And Burns's skill set is closer to Hamilton's than it is to DeAngelo's, I think. And I think that was when Carolina's power play was at their best. So I can see it popping off a lot. I can see him getting back up to the 60-point range, but at the same time, because he's old, like it's better to be a bit patient with that.
Yeah, I think patience is going to be important for anyone who goes for Brent Burns. Like you're going to want to see how it turns out, but I'm also trying to figure out how patient I want to be, because like there's been a pretty clear pattern of decline for the last few years. But I think, as you mentioned, like Carolina is probably a better fit for him than San Jose. You know, the Sharks were in decline, so I can't really blame Brent Burns for being so much on his own, especially at age 37. Someone on the like opposite side of this, heading into his age 23 season, is Miro Heiskanen, who like is getting tons of hype in fantasy circles, right? Klingberg's gone. This is his time. Everyone's always like, there's always been talk like, oh, he has so much more offense to show. He just hasn't had the chance to show it. And here he is. He's going to have the chance. Your model has him, like you boosted him to 53 points. Why do you think, I guess, why do you think he's going to have a better season than last year? And then why did you think he's going to have an even better season than that?
Yeah, he's young. He's entering his prime. He's one of the best defensemen in the world. He just hasn't had power play time and time with the top unit specifically. And I did adjust to give him more power play time, but I don't think that adjustment reflected like the change in quality of teammates that he'll get from going from power play 2 to power play 1. I think just like not even just getting that opportunity, but knowing like you are like now the guy and you're not fighting for minutes, and just having that role, I think will get him in a better rhythm for power play. And I think based on his skill set, he should be someone who is immediately elite in this role. But I don't know. I think 52 points it feels like a safe bet for him.
Yeah, I almost feel like there's some people who are expecting even more. I mean, you look at Zach Werenski, who like Seth Jones left, like we were just talking about, and then he kind of popped off last year, and now it's maybe a similar situation for Heiskanen. I think a lot of people think Heiskanen is better than Werenski anyways.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to say quickly about Burns. I know, Brian, you were talking about the shots on goal decreasing. I just have this curiosity of like, maybe that was almost by design. Like, you know, they had Karlsson on the power play. Like, you know, like now I could definitely see Burns' shots on goal increasing a lot. Now, if you're saying, Dom, that he's going to be back to like a Dougie Hamilton type role on that Carolina top power play.
We will see. I feel like Carolina's a smart team and they won't want their defensemen shooting that much, but I think just the threat of having that weapon will be helpful, and Burns might shoot a bit more, but I don't know if he'll go crazy with it, because I don't think they want the power play running through Burns. But
right, that's fair.
He's an option back there, and that like lets everything roam around more freely.
So let's go to some minus guys now. You've got Patrick Kane, who we've already discussed, and I guess that makes sense. We still have him as a point per game guy even after your minus. Then there's like 4 players who change teams, and I feel like you fit in well with Brian and us. We're also Debbie Downers when it comes to players changing teams, and often we like want to preach caution and not expect that, like, oh, new opportunity, they're going to explode. Oftentimes, like players end up not doing as well, and so like you have 4 guys here. I'll just like rhyme them off. Nazem Kadri going to Calgary, David Perron going to Detroit, Burakovsky going to Seattle, and then Tony DeAngelo going to Philly. And you put minuses, or double minuses, I should say, beside all 4 of them. So maybe just taking them quickly, like a couple at a time. Like Kadri had that crazy 100-point breakout last season. Your model already bumped him down to 70 from 100, I guess, based, of course, on like previous seasons. He's getting a little bit older. He's 31. And then you decided to bump him even further, all the way down to 63. I know, Dom, you are often someone who receives tweets from people who disagree with you, sometimes not the nicest tweets. Got to imagine, did you get anything mean from Flames fans when you have Kadri at a 63-point pace projection?
Not really. I don't know. I feel like it's a bit more realistic based on all the fantastic luck he had last year. And he's going from one of the best offensive teams in the league to a team that'll play a bit more of a defensive style. And I know. I love the player. I can't see him really getting up that high again on this team without playing on that lethal Colorado power play that also gets a million opportunities per game. Like, that's the underrated thing about Colorado. It's not so much that they're good, they are, but the fact that they get so many chances to be on the power play is like a big thing as well.
Yeah, and I think 55, 60 points seems perfect for Kadri. That's where we would have thought of him in the past. And then, like you said, Colorado's like the perfect storm of everything going right. And it didn't even look unsustainable for Kadri for a lot of the season. But the situation, like the context is all gone. And I think you've adjusted for that, or your model has really well. And plus, like, who knows? Like, he might not play with Huberdeau or Toffoli. He might be playing with like Mangiapane and Blake Coleman. Like, it's a total change.
I mean, it's a good top 6. Like, those are like, unless there were shifts he played with Landeskog or Nichushkin, like Nichushkin and Mangiapane are probably similar, but like, I feel like it's a strong second line that he'll be a part of. Like he had Burakovsky in Colorado as well. He's a good player. Love him, but very different going from Colorado to Seattle, where he's now going to be expected to be, I guess, the guy. And he's been a very efficient scorer in the middle 6 for his entire time in Colorado. And I just wonder how he shifts to a top line role where he's expected to do a bit more. But at the same time, he didn't get much power play time in Colorado. And in Seattle, he will probably be on the first unit, and that sort of mitigates some of that. So he's an interesting player, but I think because of the increase in power play time, my model was a bit overzealous, and we want to dial it back a bit.
Speaking of dialing it back, you've also dialed it back for David Perron this season. He's someone you've given a little minus sign to, and I'm curious to know more about that, because like, this is a guy who's never had, like, his even strength production continues to be pedestrian, even over this like little career renaissance he's having. That's all come on the power play. Like, just in the last 3 years, after a career of power play 2 deployment, he's hopped on the top unit, and he's been like a real stud there ever since. Like, his power play shot and shot attempt rates have spiked big. His scoring has. He's got like goals and assists are coming. And I feel like Detroit, if I'm not expecting him to perform much better at 5-on-5, which he hasn't for years, but maybe he can just step on that Detroit power play and be like as valuable there as he was in his old place. So I'm wondering, like, if we're not thinking too hard about that pedestrian 5-on-5 production and just needing Perron's top power play production to sustain, do you think it can via the top power play, or do you think even that's dicey in Detroit?
It is dicey because he's going to a lesser team, but the other issue is he might not be on that top power play at all. Detroit has, I think, several other options that they might go with. I think we looked at the depth charts where we asked Max Bultman what he thought. And I think he initially believed that Perron might not be on that top power play. So that was one of the reasons we bumped him down. And I just think it's a situation that I don't know, is definitely worse. And I think he'll perform a fair bit worse in Detroit compared to St. Louis.
Yeah, I guess he's also 34 years old, so you have that potential age regression there. So I think I'd also be conservative. And yeah, like on one hand, you think, why do you bring him in if he's not going to be on the top power play? But on the other, yeah, you've got Bertuzzi, Larkin, Lucas Raymond, and then yeah, maybe it's like Verana who takes the fourth spot, or Andrew Cobb. I don't know, probably not him. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see what happens there. Okay, yeah, and then I guess I quickly, like D'Angelo, probably pretty obvious, right? Like he plays for 65 last year. You talked about the Carolina power play. We're still expecting him, I assume, to be on the top power play on Philly, and it's just a matter of you just think Philly is like so much worse.
Yes, that is the entire deal. I think for power plays, who you play with matters a lot. And D'Angelo is a decent player and a good power play quarterback, but Philadelphia just doesn't have the weapons up front.
Okay, so next up, I want to go to a couple minus guys. So far, I think Brian and I are pretty much agreeing with you on everything you're saying. I don't think we've had anyone that we've been like, I don't know, but here's a couple minuses that I am kind of like, not that I disagree, but it piqued my interest. I'm curious to hear the explanations for. So also two guys that switched teams, starting with Kevin Fiala. So I feel like everyone is losing their mind about Kevin Fiala after he went to LA because people are thinking like, oh, this is a guy who now gets to almost for sure be on the top line when he wasn't, he wasn't playing with Kaprizov last year. And now that everyone's assuming he's going to be playing with Kopitar, also he'll be top power play. Last year, he wasn't even on the top power play the full season. And you've got Fiala still bumped down to 73 points, even though he's coming off this like 85-point season. So I'm just curious to know, like, are you like not as high on him as a king, or is it more just like last year was just totally unsustainable?
I think it's a combination of things where last year felt a bit unsustainable. I don't know if he's a true like top line guy where he was a bit sheltered in Minnesota, and I'm a little cautious of how he'll fit in that way. And I think the other thing is that Minnesota system is good for offense and LA's is not so much. And I love the fit and I think he should help a lot. I just am a little concerned about whether he has a bit of the King's disease where he just can't finish.
Yeah, that's been a problem for, well, it was a problem for like Victor Arvidsson, who we thought last year was going to sort of break out the way a lot of people, maybe a little less, but similar to how Fiala was going to go. Arvidsson was going to go to LA and do great. Now we're thinking Fiala's going to do the same. And Arvidsson took him some time to find his feet. Fiala's a guy, like, he's so interesting. I think he's going to make or break a lot of fantasy teams. He's going in the top 50 in our mocks. Mm-hmm. And I think that either makes him a reach or a steal. Like, we couldn't even figure like out Fiala's mysterious scoring habits and schedule in Minnesota, where he like couldn't produce for a full season, sometimes was absent the first quarter, the first half. So I'm staying away. It sounds like you are too, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly.
It depends where he's available. Like part of the reason we put a minus was that he was ranked really high initially. And like for my scoring settings, I have him ranked 48th. Like he's a very good winger to have. It's just there's some caution to him being thrust into a top line role.
Yeah, fair enough. And then, so here's someone else being thrust. Well, I don't know. I think you're going to argue he's being ejected from a top line role. I've seen Sens Twitter come for you already on this. We're talking about Alex DeBrincat, who, like, just in general, by the way, like you have like thousands of ads, right? Like how many a day would you estimate?
I don't know, because I also started this new feature on Twitter called you mute notifications from people who don't follow you. Nice. So if a tweet like blows up a bit and someone who doesn't follow me @s me, I will never see it. And it's been a much better system than what I had before, where I would look at literally everything and it was good. Draining. But Sens Twitter is extremely funny, and in
a good way, or
in a good way. I remember last time I said this on Twitter. Last time they were fake good and they made the playoffs even though their team was like not great, and then we were confirmed the following year where they I think finished in like last place or whatever, and the rebuild started. But they were just really obnoxious, and now they're just hilarious. And
It's a strong Twitter group. Like, I really think so. It's one I follow the most closely, but I appreciate also the way, like, there is like this back and forth between that seems like lighthearted, if a little hurt from one side. And the hurt came from you. You shared a screenshot where you ranked the Sens forwards B-. Like, you ranked the forward core, and I'm quoting a tweet. This is just from a few days back. He said, "I feel like I've seen way too many people talking like this is an elite forward group when they don't have a single truly elite player." And of course, the name that everyone's going to toss at you at that moment is Alex DeBrincat, who, is a 40-goal scorer, has been has had an amazing NHL career. Even in his down years, they weren't down. Like, to me, they just seemed like bad, unfortunate variance was happening. Everything still seemed to be going well. I actually think you're being kind of fair to him in your model. Like, I'm not coming for, like, he played 21 minutes a night in Chicago last year.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's going to get that. 35 goals, you still have him down for, which seems reasonable. So this is just a moment for you to share, like why you might not be as big on DeBrincat as some of his biggest hopefuls might be.
Yeah, I see he's being drafted 40th on Yahoo, which is a lot of hope that he is that guy.
32nd in our mocks.
Oh my God, that is interesting. Patrick Kane doesn't play for the Senators, and that would be my biggest concern by far, of whether he can replicate what he does without Kane. I think he's a fantastic player, and he should get a lot of the way there. But I think it's kind of akin to when the Leafs traded for Kessel, and Kessel popped off with Mark Savard, and the Leafs didn't have a Mark Savard. So his scoring went down to a reasonable rate, but it was still not what he did in Boston. And I think DeBrincat, I think he's better than Kessel was at the time, and is a strong forward, but I think he's in that like 25 to 35 range of best forwards, where you wonder if those guys are truly elite or if they're just like extremely good. But the other thing with Ottawa is there are a lot of mouths to feed and not a lot of power play time to go around. You talk about how loaded their top six is. Only 4 of those guys are going to be on power play 1. And we talked to, I think, Ian Mendez, and because Ottawa's power play was so good last year, or like decent enough, whatever. Josh Norris had 1 million power play goals. They might not change power play 1. They might have DeBrincat and Giroux on power play 2, and that makes things interesting because DeBrincat is such a strong power play weapon. I don't know why they wouldn't have him on power play 1, but because there is not enough ice time to go around, I think the Sens scorers might not pop off as much as people think they will.
If you got to set the lines, who would you bump from the top power play to bring in DeBrincat?
Well, I mean, one of those guys might go to jail, so
right. I guess then that opens up a spot. But
opens up a
see.
spot. Yeah.
Fair enough. So I guess next up we can go to a couple more goalies. We talked about Georgiev and Murray as guys that you have like higher than maybe some people would have expected. Brian and I did an episode recently where we tiered all the goalies in the league, and we had one guy in our tier 3, which would put him at like 10th goalie at worst, and you have him down at 18th. That's Tristan Jarry. So I was very interested to get your take on him. Maybe we're too high on Tristan Jarry. You've only got 50 games projected when he played 58 last season, and you have a 915 save percentage when he put up a 919 last season. So I'm curious to know, like, what makes you think Jarry might take a tumble in both his performance and his total games in this coming season?
I don't know. You say I have him down for 50 games. That's, again, went off 5s. Maybe it should be higher. I did not know he played 58 last year. I'll probably bump him up next round and get him closer to where I guess his ADP is, because his ADP seems relatively fair, I think.
I mean, I'm totally cool with you going with 5s. Like, that's goalies, right? Like, it's so hard to predict what a guy's going to do. So I was just curious if there was something behind it.
No, like, goalies are a lot based on volume. So you obviously want a goalie who starts like 60 games and is always playing. And I did think Jarry didn't play as much as he did last year, and that's just a user error by me. we'll fix that. And the good thing is that anyone listening to this right now can fix themselves and put a little 54 there or 55 and immediately bump Jari up.
So there you go. We got a little QA session going on here. Okay, then another goalie. So I'm curious to know if this is the same situation or not. Doesn't look like you have much faith in Jack Campbell. Not as much faith as the Oilers have, anyways. I wonder if this is like you being like maybe happy that he left the Leafs and they didn't decide to re-sign him themselves. Like he's your 20th ranked goalie according to our like cupful scoring that I put in. Another guy that you put down for only 50 games. I would have maybe expected him to play more than 50 just based on the contract. I know a lot of people think Stuart Skinner is really good, and yeah, only a 910 save percentage. I know last season was crazy. Like he was so amazing, then he was so terrible. He still landed at a 914. So is it true? Am I correct in saying that you think that Edmonton really whiffed on this signing?
No, like he's a good goalie, but like that's as far as you can really go with him. He's extremely hot and cold. And the 914, I think, obfuscates the fact that the Leafs defense was extremely good and gave him a lot of easier games. I think his expected save percentage was somewhere around like 918, 920. And so he was a lot worse than expected last year. And that all stemmed from his catastrophic fall from grace. Like first 2 months, he looked like a potential Vezina guy. After that, he looked like one of the worst goalies in the league, and the Leafs kept winning regardless. And that bodes well to like the strength of their team and why I am not as concerned with Matt Murray back there, because they were the fourth best team in the regular season with pretty terrible goaltending. So they should be fine. But the thing with Campbell is he is a bit of an injury risk as well. So I put him and Matt Murray down for a similar amount of games. I feel like that is basically where you're a starter, but there's some injury concern for both of them.
Maybe the type of goalie that if you draft, maybe then late in the draft, you grab their backup if you have room, just in case, because if they do get injured, which is more likely, then that backup becomes a little more valuable.
I feel like backups are usually just available on the waivers.
That's true. Yeah. I guess with like Samsonov, I just imagine, like, I don't know, maybe I'm like way too low on Murray. I just assume like game one, like halfway through the game, he'll have a season ending injury. And I hope not, right? Like I hope he'll be good. It's just so hard to imagine him playing.
It's possible. It's possible.
Yeah, so I guess I wanted to ask you, by the way, you've already done, I think the general vibe we have, at least in the Patreon group, is that you only drop your rankings and this spreadsheet, like once you've already done your draft. Is that the case? Like you already drafted for your main league?
Nope, I didn't draft yet.
Oh no.
I was in New York on Labor Day and I had a concert. Usually my draft is on Labor Day. And it's the easiest way to get everyone in the same room. And this year, my best friend is on his honeymoon. That is the other issue. And he doesn't come back until the 21st. And so I'm like, we're not having the draft without you. I'm going to go to New York. I have this concert. It's all good. And so I had to drop their rankings regardless. And it's funny because I've dropped the rankings once before my draft. And that was the 1 year I was like set up to win it all because I had all these picks. My keepers were amazing. And because everyone had access to my little sheet, I didn't get all the guys I would have normally have gotten, and it was a bummer where I finished second, I think, or third or whatever. The playoffs were a bit rough, and this year's the same. I set myself up for a good season. My keepers are disgusting, and again, I won't have the advantage of being the only one with my projections.
Still think you probably should be the favorite, right? You have that innate draft strategy sense that they won't have. You could set like those numbers perfectly.
Some of them do. It's tough, but listen to my keepers. Okay. Are you ready for this? Last year I spent like, I knew my team like wasn't good enough to make the playoffs contend in the playoffs. So I'm like, I'm just going to tank a bit and get some strong keepers. So here are the keepers. It's 3 forwards, 2D, 1 goalie, 12 teams. We got Mitch Marner, Matthew Tkachuk, Jack Hughes, Dougie Hamilton, Miro Heiskanen, Connor Hellebuck. Those 3 forwards are, I think, just disgusting to have. And I love watching all of them. So I think it's a fun keeper group, and it's a young keeper group outside of, I think, Dougie Hamilton, but I just love Hamilton regardless.
I like that makeup. Like, it reminds me, like, you don't have any of those like top, like top 5 guys. You sort of have, like, I think like Kachuk and Who was it again? Oh, and Marner. Chuck
yeah.
Marner. Yeah, like I feel like those are two guys that would go like kind of late in the first round
Yeah.
in most drafts. Last year in the cupful, I did an auction draft, and I also like sort of like avoided, like I didn't spend the big money on like the McDavids and the Matthews, but I got Rantanen and Barkov in the auction, and then I got Kyle Connor. So sort of similar. I think it's kind of a similar three guys, like, or at least last year Kyle Connor wasn't ranked as high, right? So he was a kind of a late second, kind of like maybe a Jack Hughes would be now.
Yeah,
I think you're gonna win.
I hope so. For me, it's just the age of everyone where they're all like in their prime.
Oh yeah, so it's not only for I'm just thinking for next season. Yeah, like
Yeah.
long term, you're hopefully just going to get better and better.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we're done with our general questions. One fun thing I wanted to ask you about is like Brian was sort of talking about how sometimes people are mad at you, like the Ottawa fans are coming at you on Twitter. Another take you had that I'd be curious to know actually what is the thing that people got the most mad at you about over this past season or over this off season. But I know one that I saw a lot of people not so happy about was you did that article about the worst contracts in the league, the top 10.
Yeah.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
I don't remember which. Oh, Nick Suzuki.
Yeah, Nick Suzuki. People were upset
like,
that you had him there.
Just read what I wrote. That's it. You can tell who read it and who didn't, and I just ignored the people who didn't. That's all.
Right.
All we needed to do, really. The worst I got, and this is what caused me to go into my settings and mute anyone who doesn't follow me, was during the Rangers playoff run. All I tweeted was, "Must be nice to not face a starting goalie." And they went insane.
Yeah. Rangers. I felt like Rangers Twitter this past playoffs was like Habs Twitter the playoffs before, like this massive, massive chip on their shoulder that like they knew, like they couldn't acknowledge like what was happening was amazing and exciting, but it also wasn't like completely supposed to happen. But enjoy it. Like don't be mad at people for mentioning that. Like, hey, this is special. Like go with it, run with it.
Yeah, I feel like when you spend the whole season being told you're fake good and then you make it to the conference finals, you get sort of that angry energy of I told you so, and then anyone like still doesn't believe it is like screw you, and we'll get a little angry. And I understand it, I respect it. I think that's one of the values of having models, is that fans have a target for who to be upset at, and I think it's really funny. Like proving a model wrong there's just something about it. There's something about it that makes fans so happy, a sense of community, and I enjoy that I offer that to them.
And it's nice also that for you could just be like, don't be mad at me, be mad at the robot. I didn't come up with these. What do you think about the Rangers for next year? Is like now are they not as much fake good now they brought in Trocheck, or do you think it doesn't make that much of a difference?
I mean, we'll see how much better he is than Strome. I thought Strome was pretty good on the Rangers, so I don't know if that's really an upgrade, but they are not a deep team. They have a very strong core. They have the best goalie in the world. That'll be enough to make the playoffs. I think what they do at the deadline will be extremely telling of how good they can be. And I think the biggest wild card is their three kids and whether they can take a meaningful step forward like they show in the playoffs. So Lafreniere, Kako, and Hedl, if just one of them takes a huge jump, I think the Rangers are immediately a much better team and maybe even a contender. You can put Miller in that conversation as well. And the more of those four that jump and have a huge breakout, the better situated Rangers are. It's just that none of them have really yet. Miller was pretty strong last year. I think he looked like a solid top four guy, but if he can jump up and be a legit top pairing guy, I think that'll be huge for them.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like it's a matter of just like, can these guys meet their draft stock? All of a sudden they have like a bunch of superstars, right?
Yeah.
And I guess Kravtsov also is coming back, so we'll have to see what he is. Okay, Dom, this has been so amazing. Like I could keep talking to you, obviously, and asking you about more of your projections, but I assume you have very important things to do, important business meetings as the staff writer at The Athletic. That sounds like a very high important position.
I'm a senior writer now. Is
senior better than staff?
Yeah, it means you're old now, I guess. I don't know. I'm gonna feed myself and my dogs. That is the important business that is happening after this podcast.
You know that, so at my company, I'm a software developer, and actually a staff developer is higher than a senior developer. So who knows with these titles?
I don't know. I know that at my company, senior is more important than staff.
Okay. Well, so that could be another thing people can give us feedback about on the show, what you think is better. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Dom, so is there anything you want to tell people to check out beyond what we've already discussed?
No, people know where to find me. Season previews start tomorrow, and that's always fun to talk about every team 3,000 words at a time. So I think those are the two things people look forward to most in September. They're from me, anyways, my fantasy projections and my season previews. So those are coming, and I don't know when this podcast drops to those listening right now. On Monday, you'll learn a lot more about the Arizona Coyotes and the Montreal Canadiens.
And are these going to be the last bottom two teams in the league? Is that a spoiler?
Yes, that is a little spoiler hint of who's coming tomorrow.
I guess Chicago. Okay, anyways, I could keep going forever talking to you, but okay. Thanks so much for coming on, Dom. Really appreciate it. Everyone should follow you at Dom Luschischen, and of course, also like read all of your articles on The Athletic. It's like you're not doing it right, I think, if you're not following what Dom is doing. So thanks so much again, and hope you enjoy your lunch.
Thanks for having me. It's breakfast still. It's still breakfast.
I knew it was
time.
breakfast. You guys skipped breakfast to be on the show.
Yeah.
Huge sacrifice.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
All right. See you, Dom.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Dom. Great chatting.
All right. And then Brian, Dom, you can still hang out if you want. But Brian, I guess we could just wrap up the show.
You
now.
can eat breakfast on camera if you'd like.
I didn't know how it worked, so whether you guys were still hanging out.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. I don't know. Well, yeah. Let's say goodbye.
Gonna-
We really appreciate it. Like, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure having you on.
We'll
All right.
close the show officially, but you go
Okay.
eat.
All
Treat
right.
yourself.
See you guys.
Okay.
Now we
Bye.
talk shit about everything Dom just said. What an idiot.
Can you believe when
Nick Suzuki with a bad contract. Okay.
Arpan Basu also talked about that on 32 Beats. Like he's like in the context, like Dom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't play. It's the model. Also,
The model.
It's not Dom.
Dom needs to change his avatar to like a computer, like to like his laptop.
Well, sorry. Frank is asking, is Eklund starting the season with the Sharks? I mean, after that beautiful goal he just scored in the rookie game a couple days ago, how can he not? Come on, who do the Sharks have?
Yeah,
who are
I
the
think
Sharks being like, no,
he'll
you
start
don't make
the
the team?
season, and then I think they'll decide. There's two factors, right? One, is he good enough? Like, is he ready, or does he need some more like developing? And two, is it worth burning a year of his or wait, is he still in that phase? How many games did he play last year?
He didn't play that much. He only played like 8 or 9, and then they sent him down.
Did he do like beneath the tryout? He had 9 games. Yeah, so he got his 9 games. So I think those are the two considerations. But yeah, like you said, Dylan, who else is gonna play in San Jose?
Unless they're tanking, right? But it's like, why did you sign Tomas Hertl to an 8-year contract if you're going to tank?
Well, that's it. I think they promised Erik Karlsson that they were like gonna try and go for it and do stuff. But
And then did they?
well, I think and I'm trying to remember. They didn't bring anybody in.
I think they're bringing in
This offseason.
Eklund and Bordelot. That's who they're bringing in.
Yeah, they're bringing, and they have Capo Kakinen from the trade deadline last year. Maybe
they signed a bunch of like
Ozzy
boring guys.
Weisblatt could come in. Maybe he'll do
Perhaps.
something. But yeah, like their second line right now is Couture with LeBanc and Luke Kunin.
Yeah, they brought in Kunin. They brought like Oscar Lindblom.
Yeah.
Like, these sort of lower
a bunch of
end
guys, a bunch
Yeah.
of bottom 6 guys. So
All right.
Yeah.
Anyways, Brian, I want to actually finish the show. So
Let's
this was
finish
all
the
just
show.
this was fun content for the live show. Thanks again so much for joining. A lot of fun people. It's harder to respond to like the chat comments during a show with a guest just because we don't want to like, break the flow or whatever. But yeah, I was reading everything and really appreciate it. But okay, Brian, let's do it. So all right, Brian, that was Dom Luschischen coming on. Always amazing to get him on the show and to hear all of his fun takes and to explain the various projections. I mean, I definitely like the nice thing is like we're all on the same page here. Like anyone I'm sure drafting the couple who expects to do well is probably using that spreadsheet at least, but the nice thing is we could all like make our little tweaks as we're preparing for our drafts and like doing the pluses and the minuses. Sometimes you get those Dauber projections also, and you can sort of use those to help you decide what you're going to do. So I don't know, everyone can have their own strategies, but yeah, I love this spreadsheet. So I actually make my own spreadsheet and I basically just modeled it after this spreadsheet because I guess I'm fancy that way. But I always download it to get those projections. Okay, Brian, what else should we talk about before we go here? I guess we need to tell people that this Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, thanks to everyone who registered and signed up, in your drafts start tomorrow on Monday. So good luck to everyone in your slow drafts that are going to go, I guess, for the next couple of weeks. Very exciting.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean if you still want in on the action, we're not closing the door yet. Like if we have enough people to fill new divisions, it's 14 managers in a division and enough time to draft, we'll do it up until puck drop this season. So KKUPFL KeepingCarlsonFantasyHockey.com to find out all about that. And also you get to be part of our Discord community. Like that's sort of like, that was the number one perk for a while. And now it's like, now we're all about Cupful, but it's this amazing online hockey space. People are talking about hockey 24/7 and more. It's a beautiful little corner of the internet. It's really the only place I talk hockey online.
I like our crew for sure. Also, another big perk you get of becoming a patron. So yeah, keep the Cupful to play. You have to become a patron. I like to think of it as like you're supporting the show. You're becoming a patron to help support us because you appreciate the work we do, and this is a listener-supported show. But then we're giving you perks to thank you, as opposed to you signing up as a patron for the perks. So that's just in my head. Well, you can do what you want. But another big perk coming your way soon is, Brian, we've got a patron cast scheduled for Tuesday, where we're going to answer all of the questions that our patrons have requested. The rule with Patron Cast is we answer everything and we can't stop until we're done, which means this Tuesday might be the longest Patron Cast ever because we have so many questions and they all look like interesting and complex. So it's going to be a really wild show for people to either join us live while we record on Tuesday evening, or to listen to after we post to the Patreon like secret RSS feed that you only get as a patron. So that's going to be really fun. And we'd love to have you. And it's not even too late to post more questions if you really want to make Brian and I stay up all night and make our families mad at us. So that's something going on. So yeah, keepingcarlson.com/patron if you want to support us. I've also got another show in the hopper, Brian. Not record. I guess in the hopper isn't the right term, but I've got another show scheduled for tomorrow. As of now, I'm going to be talking to Victor Nuno on Monday about Calder candidates. This is another annual tradition where Victor's downloaded the like Vegas odds, and we're going to go over the odds makers, I guess, like picks for who they think are the best candidates to win the Calder for the top rookie. And then Victor's going to give his picks and we'll discuss like who we think are like, the odds makers are saying too high or too low. Not like that it's like a betting podcast, but just a fun way to start to jump off and like the discussion. So that's always a fun show. I guess we'll drop that like later in the week once you've had time to consume this Dom Lucian podcast. So yeah, just make sure you're subscribed to Keeping Karlsson because we've got a lot still coming to you. We want to do our best to get you prepared for your drafts. And the best way you can, make sure you get everything is to be subscribed on your Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever. I use Pocket Casts, not a paid advertisement. Yeah, wherever you get your podcast, make sure you're subscribed. You'll get all the episodes. No, won't miss anything. But Brian, I guess with that, I could stop blabbing. We've said all the main things. Let's cue the outro music. Why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dauber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our super supporters, Aaron, Tyler, Andrea, Tom, Ryan, Derek, David, Rob, and Patty. Thank you all so much for your super support. Thank you. A huge thanks to our a huge thanks to our Cupful coordinator, Kevin Hebert. Holy cow. This is going to be the best year ever of the Cupful, and it's all thanks to Kevin. He has been so organized and on top and like data oriented about like how to set up the Cupful for the best year ever. And our gratitude goes beyond words. So thanks to Kevin and our team of co-commissions and we have a few commish captains too, who are all helping get things set for draft launch on Monday at 9 a.m. So thank you to you all for all the work you're doing. Also, keep an eye on our Game Day Tweets.com suite of Twitter accounts. You can go there to find them. Thanks, Elon and Shams Benamor, for helping keep the content coming. Welcome back, Short Shifts. You can follow Ben and Lewis at Short Shifts KK. They released their season premiere earlier this week. Thank you to BrandonWeave.com for logo art, including our brand new Cupful logo that I'm going to start putting up in places. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was researched with help from Dauber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, and Dom Lucian.
Great job, Brian. Great job, Dom, again, even though he's not here. And thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll be back at you soon. Like I said, we'll have Calder candidates, and we're going to have a patron cast. And then Brian and I are still going to also do something next weekend. I think Yahoo Rankings is next. So we'll figure it out. We'll be back in your ears soon. Thanks again. Good luck, everyone, in your drafts. Oh, and tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. Let us know how it's going if you have any questions there. If you, well, I don't know. Now I just keep blabbing. The outro music is playing, so I'm just going to say goodbye and ask Brian what he recommends we all do as we get ramped up in our drafts.
I not only recommend, but I urge you to do all that you can to make sure that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
I'm going to go have lunch?
I'm
I don't know.
gonna Dom. That's the proof. Like we were talking about ages when Dom first came on. That's the proof. He's eating breakfast at 11:30. I'm like, it's been like I've been up 9 hours. Where's my lunch?
I'll learn about that soon, I'm sure.
practically on dinner.
All right, see you everyone. Thanks so much. Bye.
Such
I don't know, what, is that bad?
bye. Well, like,
Goodbye.
Thanks.
How do you say bye?
Bye.
Bye.
Well, actually, usually bye.
Bye.
That's a good way.
All right.
Can't tell. It's either like enthusiastic or insincere. Everyone can read into it what they want.
Is Kyle sucking up to us? You're like, how old are you guys? 32?
Yes. We are both 32 as of today.
See you. I'm 39.
What?
Yeah. I'm gonna turn 40 soon.
Oh yeah. When Connor McDavid turns what, 27, 26?
Yeah, the same day. Yeah, it's pretty fun having the same birthday as McDavid. I wonder, there's still NHL players older than me. If Chara doesn't come back, is there still anyone? Oh, Craig Anderson. I got Craig Anderson there. It's going to be a weird feeling when I'm older than every player in the NHL.
You're even older than Brent Burns. Oh,
I
Joe,
know.
how about Joe Pavelski? Isn't he 39?
I think he's like 38. I think he's younger than me. He's a kid.
Mark Giordano, is he in the league this
Joe
year?
Pavelski's born in 84.
Oh,
and I was
yeah.
born in 83.
Yeah, he's a baby.
Yeah, Giordano's signed to the Leafs for, I think, a couple more years. How old is he?
He's October 1983.
I was January.
Oh,
Oh, well, I got Craig Anderson.
We're trying. I have a diminishing number of players too.
Yeah, we'll both get there. One day we'll be like talking about old people when we're like so much older. Well, who knows? I wonder how long we're going to be doing this podcast. Do you see us doing this like in 20 years? Do you think this podcast is going? What are the chances?
Do podcasts exist in 20 years?
I mean, what am I supposed to do? If I retire and then I don't have any podcasts to listen to, I'm going to be so bored.
You'll have all this time and nothing to. Well, there will be a new form of entertainment.
Well, okay, I guess we'll see what it is.
What did you do before podcasts?
I think I don't know, read a book. Like, I don't know. I guess I'd be on.
You didn't read a book.
Like when I was taking like
here.
transit to go to university, like before there were podcasts to listen to, I guess I would like at some point I was playing games on my phone. Oh no, I was listening to music. I had like an that's what I was doing. I was listening to music. So fun.
You didn't read books. I know you better than that.
I read my school books. Maybe read my notes in preparation for a test if there was one coming.
I could see you doing that.
Of course.
Yeah.
I guess I'll play video games. I hope those do you think video games will still exist when I retire, or are those going too?
Maybe it'll all be VR.
I don't want to have to like stand up and move around. I just want to sit. I'm old at this point. I'm already old. I just want to sit back on the couch. I still have to move my head if like to play VR, right? Isn't the whole idea is you're moving your hands in your head and it feels like you're there? I don't want to be there. I just want to sit and relax and then do this and make it all happen.
You can dust off your PS4 and play through Horizon Zero Dawn for the 40th time.
Well, I have PS5 now, and actually I was kind of disappointed with the sequel. Actually, no, it was an amazing game. I loved it so much. The story at the end was very like Game of Thrones-esque. I feel it is my opinion. Who cares, right? Like it was a really good game gameplay wise. I would love if they make a remake of Horizon Zero Dawn, the first one, but with the gameplay of the second one. I think they did that recently with The Last of Us. Maybe no one cares about this. All right, yeah, I did go to Carleton. Is Kyle in Ottawa?
I don't think so.
Oh, I don't know. Well, yeah, I'm an alum. Anyway, I guess we should go. See you, everybody.
Do you donate to the school?
No. Who does that?
I had a job once where I was the person calling to solicit donations from alumni.
There's a really funny rant.
I didn't like the job. It was very hard to do.
John Mulaney has a bit about that where it's like he paid like $120,000 for his education and now his school is like asking him for more money. And it's like, I got a literature degree which was totally useless to me and I paid so much money for it and now you're calling me asking me for more money?
I mean, in the US, it's even a crazier ask, but I think we're getting there in Canada too. But I agree, like you pay, you get the education. The universities, I think they should be able to take care of themselves.
Yeah, like you're still charging people. Like it's not like I went to a restaurant like 5 years ago and now people are like, hey, you want to give a donation to keep the restaurant going?
Yeah, donate so for future people to enjoy meals here.
Like, look, we have a podcast.
Build a new kitchen.
we keep putting out new episodes for people. We ask our listeners to become patrons and support the show. But it's like, if we ever stopped the show, I wouldn't still be asking people to give us money, right? Like, I'd be like, I guess, you're not getting value out of us anymore. I'm not going to ask you for money. Maybe the university think people are still getting value from being an alum. Like, you get like, I don't know, some cred and you go to events. I don't go to alumni events. Do you go to any alumni events?
No.
Yeah. So I could see those people maybe wanting to support the school if they like are still, going around like talking about it and making that part of their value prop. I don't know. Where were we gonna go? We're still live here.
We should.
Right.
We could
see you, everybody.
Save it for the patron guests.
Yeah, we got a 4-hour show coming on Tuesday, so we'll talk more then. See ya.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye, Brian.